Hello, everyone. Welcome. Oh, hold on, I've got coffee in my hand. Ah, coffee. Wonderful. All right. Welcome. Welcome to the last in my lecture series for Intro to Art. This is the methods of art history. And we touched briefly on these methods in the last lecture, the history of art history. And this one's long and in depth, and so I might break it into two parts. We will see. Definitely might need a break halfway through this one, but either way, the goal of this lecture is to give you an idea of the different lenses through which we can analyze a work of art. So there is no one way to look at art. There is a whole lot of different ways, and what I'm presenting here is not a complete list, but it is pretty thorough. So let's begin. The methods of art history. So we're going to start with formalism. And yes, we talked about formalism in the last lecture, but here we're really going to get into it. So, formalism is a critical theory in art history that emphasizes the analysis of a work of art based solely on its formal elements, such as line, shape, color, texture, and composition, rather than its historical, cultural, or contextual background. So, these formal elements should be familiar. This is what we've been talking about all semester. These are the elements of art and also the principles of composition, right? So we're going to get into that in detail here. But yes, we are looking at just what is in the picture plane, what is contained within the frame for formalism. So this approach advocates a close reading of the artwork itself, asserting that the meaning and value of art can be derived from its intrinsic qualities alone, the work of art as a closed system. So for this analysis, we're going to look at Composition 7 by Vasily Kandinsky, which was executed in 1913. So first, looking at the color, Kandinsky employs a vibrant, dynamic color palette that is dominated by reds, blues, yellows, and greens. The interplay of these primary and secondary colors creates an energetic visual rhythm. His use of complementary colors, such as the juxtaposition of reds and greens, heightens the visual contrast and vibrancy. Warm tones like orange and red seem to advance, while cooler blues and greens recede, creating a dynamic sense of depth and movement. The lack of defined color fields prevents the viewer from focusing on a singular part of the painting, reinforcing its abstract and immersive qualities. The lines. The lines in Composition 7 range from bold, sweeping arcs to fragmented, jagged strokes. The arcs create a sense of unity and circular motion, suggesting both fluidity and tension. Some lines appear as structural anchors, while others dissolve into amorphous shapes, creating a tension between order and chaos. The overlapping linear elements guide the viewer's eyes across the canvas, emphasizing the painting's all-over composition. Right? Aside from really the lower right, this is a full composition. There is something going on in every square inch of this piece. And even that stillness in the lower right is only still within the context of the rest of the piece. Shapes. Kandinsky incorporates regular, amorphous shapes, which blend and collide without clear boundaries. These shapes contribute to the work's dynamism and suggest the dissolution of form. The absence of representational imagery forces the viewer to focus on the relationships between shapes, their interaction with colors, and their role in generating emotional impact. Texture. The texture in Composition 7 is largely visual, created by Kandinsky's varied brushwork. Bold, impasto-like strokes coexist with lighter, transparent layers of paint, creating an interplay of density and airiness. So remember, actually, with these impasto strokes, these would be the actual texture of the thing, right? Where the visual texture is, it's this push and pull, that's depth that's created by the the composition itself by the juxtaposition of the different colors, right? The depth isn't actually there. It is the illusion of depth created by the paint itself and the composition, the shapes, the lines. The textural variation enhances the painting's complexity, offering the viewer a multi-layered experience, right? We can actually see the paint and then the effects of the paint on our perception. Space. Composition 7 is characterized by a lack of a defined spatial framework. The elements seem to float freely in an ambiguous, non-representational space, right? Remember linear perspective, 1 point, 2 point, 3 point, 4 point perspective. We talked about these briefly. There is no linear perspective here. There's a slight suggestion of it, but everything kind of exists in this undefined space. The overlapping shapes and layered colors suggest depth, but deny any fixed perspective, inviting viewers to perceive space as fluid and subjective. Composition. So the compositional analysis, right? We're going back to earlier in this class. Unity and rhythm, right? Despite the apparent chaos, this painting exhibits a strong sense of unity. This is achieved through the repetition of arcs, circular forms, and consistent use of vibrant color. It all fits. It might be chaotic, but it all fits together. The rhythmic arrangement of visual elements generates a musical quality, echoing Kandinsky's belief in the synesthetic relationship between visual art and music. If you ever get the chance to read concerning the spiritual and art, it is all about the musicality of painting. Well, not all about, but there's big chunks that are about that. All right, so balance. Kandinsky balances complexity with cohesion. Areas of dense activity are offset by relatively calmer passages, allowing the eye to navigate the canvas without becoming overwhelmed, right? And that also kind of goes into rhythm, right? It's the crescendo, diminuendo. There are loud spaces and there are quieter spaces. The painting avoids symmetry but maintains equilibrium through the dynamic distribution of visual weight across the composition. Dynamic movement. The painting's circular and diagonal elements create a centrifugal energy, drawing the viewer into the center of the composition and then radiating back outwards. The interplay of contrasting elements, light and dark, bold and soft, sharp and curved, produces a sense of perpetual motion. This painting, right, it's fixed, it's done, it's looked the same since it was finished over 100 years ago, and yet when you look at it, it's constantly changing, breathing, shuffling. You're always finding new things in the work every time you look at it. Emotional and aesthetic impact. In a formalist framework, Composition 7 evokes a sense of profound emotional intensity through its dynamic interplay of visual elements. The swirling chaos, vibrant colors, and rhythmic lines suggest themes of transformation and spiritual awakening. Kandinsky's avoidance of representational forms liberates the viewer to experience the work on an intuitive, visceral level, engaging directly with the aesthetic harmony and dissonance of the composition. In conclusion, through its masterful manipulation of color, line, shape, texture, and space, Composition 7 exemplifies Kandinsky's commitment to abstraction and his belief in the emotive power of pure visual form. A formalist perspective highlights the painting's ability to transcend narrative, offering a universal aesthetic experience rooted in the interplay of its compositional elements. This work stands as a testament to the potential of abstract art to convey profound emotional and spiritual depth without relying on representational imagery. Oh man, that's a good one. One of my favorite paintings. Here, I've got to take a sip of coffee. That was a lot. Wonderful, wonderful. Where am I going to put this thing down? Okay, so now moving right along. Structuralism. Structuralism is an intellectual movement based on the idea that things cannot be understood in isolation. They must be viewed in the context of larger structures. These structures are primarily social and cultural. Additionally, there is no universal objective structure. Instead, there are many layers to social structures, ranging from an individual's social circle to national doctrines and religious beliefs. Unlike formalism, there is no internal significance or essential meaning in an object. Meaning is always outside and is attributed to things by the human mind. A result of external meaning is that it moves away from the object in question. Analysis of a single work of art becomes increasingly abstract, leading to questions of genre, history, and philosophy. Semiotics is a closely related field, and this is the study of signs and symbols. It's foundational to interpreting art. It posits that meaning is not inherent in objects, but constructed through social and cultural context, right? So we see, I kind of mentioned this before with the iconology, iconography, right? When you see something, right, the meaning is actually outside of the things. It is the society in which it exists that gives it meaning. So here I'm sitting here with a coffee cup in my hand, right? And recently I learned that handles on cups didn't exist in Asian pottery until the 19th century, until the European influence came in, right? And so the handle on a cup is something like we look at it, we understand coffee cup, but in a different cultural context, it means something completely different and actually could be a completely unknown object for some people. Like, why is there a handle? Why don't you just hold the cup? I don't know. We like handles. All right. So moving on, an example of a structuralist art criticism can be illustrated through an analysis of Pablo Picasso's Les Demoiselles d'Avignon. This painting is often regarded as a pivotal work in the development of modern art and can be examined through a structuralist lens in several ways. So, the formal composition, it's always good to start with a formal analysis, even if you're going to go on to something different, like this being outside the canvas. Mostly, we still need to know what's on the canvas, right? So a structuralist critic would begin by examining the formal elements of the painting, such as the arrangement of figures, the use of geometric shapes, and the color palette. Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, I know I'm going to end up butchering the title of this by the end of this discussion. The painting features 5 female figures, each depicted with angular forms and fragmented features. The structuralist approach would focus on how these elements disrupt traditional representations of the female form and challenge the conventions of perspective and depth that dominated Western art prior to this work. The painting's composition can be seen as a radical departure from the classical ideals of beauty and proportion, reflecting a new visual language that prioritizes abstraction and the deconstruction of form. The cultural context and artistic conventions. So, a structuralist critic would contextualize the painting within the broader movements of Cubism and modernism, exploring how Picasso's work expresses or reflects the cultural shifts of the early 20th century, including the influence of African art and the rise of urbanization. By breaking down the figures into geometric shapes and presenting multiple viewpoints simultaneously, Picasso challenges the viewer's perception and invites a re-evaluation of artistic conventions. This analysis highlights how Les Demoiselles d'Avignon serves as a commentary on the evolving nature of art and the ways in which artists respond to and reflect societal changes. Binary oppositions is a really important part of structuralism and semiotics, I believe specifically semiotics. A structuralist critic would identify and analyze the binary oppositions present in the painting, such as the contrast between the traditional and the avant-garde, the male gaze versus female agency, and the sacred versus the profane. The figures in the painting can be interpreted as both objects of desire and subjects with their own agency, complicating the viewer's understanding of femininity and sexuality. By presenting the figures in a confrontational manner, Picasso subverts the traditional roles assigned to women in art, creating a tension that reflects the complexities of gender dynamics in early 20th century society. The structuralist approach would also involve examining the signs and symbols within the paintings. For instance, the use of masks and the angularity of the figures can be interpreted as references to African art, which Picasso was known to have admired. This incorporation of non-Western elements serves to challenge Eurocentric notions of beauty and representation. The painting becomes a site of negotiation between different cultural sign systems, illustrating how meaning is constructed through the interplay of various influences and contexts. Through a structuralist analysis of Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, we see how the painting operates within a complex web of formal elements, cultural contexts, and binary oppositions. This approach allows critics to uncover the underlying structures that inform the work, revealing its significance not only as a groundbreaking piece of art, but also as a reflection of the cultural and social dynamics of its time. The analysis emphasizes the importance of understanding art as a system of signs that communicates meaning within specific historical and cultural frameworks. This approach we skipped the last one. I was looking at it like, what is this? What is this supposed to do? But then, of course, I can't go back when I'm recording this. So anyways, we're moving right along to the psychoanalytic art criticism. This is a method of analyzing and interpreting works of art through the lens of psychoanalytic theory. Yeah, that's the right way to say it. Primarily based on the theories of Sigmund Freud. This approach seeks to uncover the unconscious motivations, desires, and conflicts that may influence an artist's creative process and the meanings embedded within their artwork. So we're going to be looking at Edvard Munch's The Scream. I know a lot of people also really like to look at Salvador Dali when discussing Freud's psychoanalytical theories. So here, Edvard Munch created The Scream in 1839 during a period marked by personal turmoil and existential anxiety. Munch's life was characterized by mental health struggles, family tragedies, and a deep exploration of themes related to love, anxiety, and death. Understanding Munch's biography is crucial for a psychoanalytical interpretation of his work. His unconscious motivations. In psychoanalytic terms, The Scream can be seen as a manifestation of Munch's own psychological state. The figure in the painting, with its agonized expression and distorted features, may represent Munch's internal struggles with anxiety and despair. Psychoanalytic critics might argue that the figure embodies Munch's repressed fears and existential dread, reflecting a deep-seated sense of alienation from the world. The symbolism. So the swirling sky in The Scream is often interpreted as a representation of emotional turmoil. The vibrant colors and chaotic lines can symbolize the intensity of the figure's feelings. Psychoanalytic critics might suggest that the landscape itself is a projection of the artist's inner psyche, where the tumultuous sky mirrors the character's mental state. This aligns with Freud's idea that art can serve as a symbolic expression of the unconscious mind. Sublimation. Munch's ability to transform his personal anguish into a powerful work of art exemplifies the concept of sublimation. Rather than succumbing to his fears, Munch channels his emotional pain into a creative expression that resonates with universal themes of anxiety and existential crisis. This process of sublimation allows the artist to confront and articulate his inner conflicts through the medium of painting, making his personal struggles accessible to viewers. Pathography. A psychoanalytic reading of the Scream would also consider Munch's personal history. The artist experienced significant trauma, including the death of his mother from tuberculosis and the mental illness of his father. These experiences likely influenced his perception of life and death, which is poignantly captured in the painting. Critics might explore how Munch's pathography informs the emotional depth of the Scream, suggesting that the work is not just a reflection of individual suffering, but also a commentary on the human condition itself. Critique of reductionism. While psychoanalytic interpretations can yield profound insights, they can also be critiqued for being reductive. Some art historians argue that focusing solely on the artist's psychological state may overlook other important factors, such as the socio-political context of the time or the broader artistic movements influencing Munch's work. Thus, while psychoanalysis provides a valuable framework, it should be integrated with other critical approaches to fully appreciate the complexity of the artwork. In conclusion, in summary, a psychoanalytic art criticism of Edvard Munch's The Scream reveals the intricate relationship between the artist's psyche and his work. By examining the unconscious motivations, symbolic elements, and personal history of Munch, critics can uncover deeper meanings within the painting that resonate with universal themes of anxiety and existential dread. This approach not only enriches our understanding of the artwork, but also highlights the power of art as a medium for exploring the complexities of the human experience. Moving along to feminist art criticism, which emerged as a response to the historical exclusion of women from the art canon, challenging the masculinist bias that has dominated art history. Critics like Griselda Pollock argue that traditional criteria for artistic greatness were established by men, often overlooking the contributions of women artists. This exclusion is not merely an oversight, but a reflection of structural sexism that maintains the status quo in cultural narratives. Feminist art seeks to uncover the gendered dynamics within traditional art forms, revealing how societal structures have oppressed women. For instance, the work of artists like Mary Cassatt illustrate how feminist art can reflect women's experiences without reducing them to mere victims. Had to get a little sip of coffee in there. All right. So now we're going to look at Judy Chicago's The Dinner Party, which serves as a rich case study for feminist art criticism due to its thematic content, historical context, and the critical discourse it has generated. So, quick overview. The Dinner Party is a large-scale installation that features a triangular table set for 39 notable women from history, each represented by a unique place setting that include intricately designed plates, utensils, and embroidered runners. The women honored range from ancient figures like Hypatia and Sappho to modern icons like Virginia Woolf and Georgia O'Keeffe. The installation is both a celebration of women's achievements and a critique of their historical erasure. The historical context and recovery. So, feminist art critics highlight how The Dinner Party addresses the historical marginalization of women in art and culture. Chicago's work serves as a reclamation of women's narratives, bringing to light figures who have been overlooked in traditional art history. Critics argue that by placing these women at the table, Chicago not only honors their contribution, but also critiques the patriarchal structures that have excluded them from the historical canon. Symbolism and representation. The triangular shape of the table is significant, as it symbolizes equality and inclusivity, contrasting with the traditional round table often associated with male-dominated discourse. Each place setting is uniquely designed to reflect the individual woman's contributions and experiences, emphasizing the diversity of women's identities and achievements. Feminist critics analyze how these representations challenge the notion of a singular male-centric narrative in art history. Chicago's use of traditionally feminine crafts, such as ceramics and embroidery, is another focal point of feminist criticism. Critics argue that by elevating these crafts to the level of fine art, Chicago challenges the gendered hierarchy that often devalues women's work. This aspect of the installation invites discussions about the relationship between gender, labor, and artistic value, as it redefines what constitutes high art. The installation is designed to be interactive, inviting viewers to engage with the work and reflect on the significance of the women represented. Feminist critics emphasize the importance of this engagement as it encourages a dialogue about women's roles in history and the ongoing struggle for gender equality. The act of dining at the table becomes a metaphor for inclusion and recognition, prompting viewers to consider their own relationships to the narratives presented. The dinner party also serves as a critique of the art world itself, which has historically favored male artists and narratives. Feminist critics point out that the installation's reception has often been polarized, with some critics dismissing it as overly sentimental or didactic. This response reflects the entrenched masculinist biases within the art world, which feminist critics seek to expose and challenge. In conclusion, in summary, Judy Chicago's The Dinner Party exemplifies feminist art criticism by addressing the historical exclusion of women from art and culture, celebrating their contributions and challenging traditional notions of artistic value and representation. Through its rich symbolism, materiality, and audience engagement, the installation not only honors women's achievements but also serves as a powerful critique of the patriarchal structures that have shaped art history. Feminist art critics continue to analyze and discuss the implications of this work, highlighting its significance in the ongoing discourse surrounding gender in art. Social art criticism examines the interplay between art, society, and the human condition, emphasizing how economic and social contexts shape artistic expression. This approach is rooted in Marxist theory, particularly the ideas of Karl Marx regarding class struggle and economic determinism. An exemplary case of social art criticism can be found in the analysis of Diego Rivera's mural, Man at the Crossroads. This was originally commissioned for the Rockefeller Center in New York City in 1933. This mural serves as a rich subject for social art criticism due to its political content, historical context, and the controversies surrounding its creation. So, a little bit of historical context. This mural was created during the Great Depression, a time of significant economic hardship in the United States. Rivera, a prominent Mexican muralist, was known for his commitment to social and political themes, often reflecting the struggles of the working class and advocating for socialist ideals. Rivera was commissioned by the Rockefeller family to create a mural that would celebrate modern industry and progress. However, the mural's content, which included depictions of workers, industrial scenes, and a controversial portrayal of Lenin, clashed with the Rockefeller family's capitalist values. The mural was ultimately destroyed before its completion, leading to a public outcry and debates about artistic freedom and censorship. Here we have as big of a presentation of this as I could fit into the slideshow, and kind of center right in between these wings, these oval rings. You can see Lenin there interacting with the people. And the Rockefellers were not super pleased about this. And can kind of see why. This wouldn't jive with their capitalist values. So, social art critics analyze Man at the Crossroads as a reflection of the ideological tensions between capitalism and socialism. Rivera's inclusion of Lenin and the imagery of workers rising against oppression can be interpreted as a direct challenge to capitalist ideologies. Critics argue that the mural serves as a visual manifesto advocating for the rights of the proletariat and critiquing the exploitation inherent in capitalist systems. The mural prominently features laborers and industrial workers, emphasizing their role in the economy and society. Critics highlight how Rivera's work elevates the working class, portraying them as heroic figures engaged in the struggle for social justice. This focus on labor aligns with Marxist principles, which view art as a reflection of the economic base and the conditions of the working class. Artists were part of this working class. The destruction of the mural raises important questions about censorship and the role of art in society. Social art critics examine how the Rockefeller family's decision to remove the mural reflects broader societal fears of socialist ideas during a time of economic crisis. This incident illustrates the power dynamics between artists and patrons, as well as the societal implications of artistic expression. Rivera's mural can also be seen as a commentary on the cultural landscape of the 1930s. By situating the mural within the context of the rise of labor movements and the fight for workers' rights, critics argue that it captures the zeitgeist of the era, making it a significant cultural artifact that resonates with contemporary struggles for social justice. In summary, Diego Rivera's Man at the Crossroads serves as a compelling example of social art criticism. Through its ideological content, focus on labor, and the circumstances surrounding its creation and destruction, the mural exemplifies how art can reflect and challenge social realities. Critics use this case to explore the intersections of art, politics, and society, demonstrating the importance of context in understanding artistic expression. All right. Yep, gotta stay caffeinated here. We're about halfway through. I hope everybody's keeping with me. I know this is a lot, but this is actual art history, right? Being able to identify paintings and artists by looking at slides and pictures is kind of outdated, right? I mean, a Google image search can do it better than I can, and I know a pretty good amount about art history. But learning to apply these different theoretical lenses, being able to change your own context on the fly, is not only invaluable for looking at works of art, but being a functional member of society and not getting stuck in your own personal biases. That is really the point here, and one of the main points of art. is to challenge your beliefs and get you to look at the world differently. And art history, art criticism is no different. We need to get outside of ourselves and to learn to communicate. And even if you don't agree with it, being able to see through somebody else's perspective is crucial. It's critical to good communication and to both personal and social growth. So anyways, moving right along. Post-colonial art criticism is a critical framework that emerged in the late 20th century primarily in response to the legacies of colonialism and imperialism. It seeks to analyze and reinterpret art and visual culture through the lens of post-colonial theory, which examines the cultural, political, and social impacts of colonial rule on both colonizers and the colonized. So, for this, we're going to look at Yinka Shonobare's The Swing, after Fragonard. This is Jean-Honoré Fragonard's The Swing, which, let's see, I wrote a whole bunch on this last semester. What was it? 1870. Oh, well, my brain is drawing a blank on when this was originally done, but it is kind of the most iconic painting of the Rococo period. Yeah, wow. All right. So, in The Swing, after Fragonard, which was done in 2001, Shonobare reinterprets Jean-Honoré Fragonard's famous 18th century painting. Is this coming back to me? 1762? Something about that? Yes, The Swing. The original work depicts a young woman on a swing playfully engaging with a man hidden in the bushes while another man looks on. Shonobare's version features a headless figure dressed in vibrant patterned fabric that resembles traditional African textiles but is actually made from Dutch wax-printed cotton, a material that has complex colonial connotations. Shonobare's use of Dutch wax fabric is significant in a post-colonial context. The fabric, while often associated with African identity, has its origins in European colonial trade. This hybridization reflects the complexities of identity in post-colonial societies, where cultural elements are intertwined and redefined through colonial histories. Shonobare's work challenges the notion of a singular cultural identity, illustrating how identities are formed through the interaction of different cultural influences. And here we have the original Fragonard work on the right and the interpretation on the left. And yeah, very kind of poignant discussion here. Please excuse me while I shuffle myself around here. All right, yes. So by placing a headless figure in the artwork, Shonobare comments on the erasure of identity and agency in colonial narratives. The absence of the head symbolizes the disempowerment of colonized subjects, who were often denied their voices and identities within colonial discourse. This critique aligns with post-colonial theorist Gayatri Spivak's assertion that the subaltern cannot speak, highlighting the silencing of marginalized voices in history. Shonobare's work also serves as a critique of the Western art canon. By appropriating and recontextualizing a well-known Western artwork, he questions the authority of traditional art historical narratives that often exclude non-Western perspectives. This act of reappropriation is a form of resistance against the dominance of Eurocentric art history, and invites viewers to reconsider the cultural significance of the original work. The playful, yet provocative nature of The Swing just juxtaposes themes of leisure and privilege with the underlying historical realities of colonial exploitation. Shonobare's work prompts viewers to reflect on the socio-economic disparities that persist in post-colonial societies, where the legacies of colonialism continue to shape contemporary power dynamics. The vibrant colors and patterns in Shonobari's work draw attention to the aesthetics of cultural representation. By using textiles that are both visually striking and laden with historical significance, he engages viewers in a dialogue about the politics of representation and the ways in which cultural symbols can be appropriated and redefined. In conclusion, Yinka Shonobari's The Swing, after Fragonard, exemplifies post-colonial art criticism by addressing the complexities of identity, cultural hybridity, and the legacies of colonialism. Through his work, Shonobari not only critiques colonial narratives, but also redefines the parameters of art history, inviting a more inclusive understanding of cultural expression. His art serves as a powerful commentary on the ongoing impacts of colonialism and the need for a critical engagement with the past in order to understand contemporary identities and power structures. Phenomenology, hermeneutics, and reception theory. So these ones, in my master's study, were all kind of lumped together. But they are independent approaches. They're just very closely allied approaches. So, phenomenology is rooted in the philosophical traditions of Edmund Husserl and later developed by Martin Heidegger and Maurice Merleau-Ponty. This emphasizes the direct experience of art. This approach focuses on how artworks present themselves to consciousness and how viewers engage with them in the present moment. Hermeneutics is the study of interpretation, and it has its roots in the works of Friedrich Schleiermacher, probably going to mess up all of everyone's names, Wilhelm Dilthey, and Hans Georg Gadamer. This approach focuses on understanding the meaning of an artwork by examining its cultural, historical, and linguistic context. Reception theory. Originating in the literary field, particularly through the works of Hans Robert Joss and Wolfgang Iser, reception theory shifts the focus from the artwork itself to the audience's response. It posits that the meaning of an artwork is not fixed, but is completed by the viewer. Together, phenomenology, hermeneutics, and reception theory provide a multifaceted understanding of art. They highlight the importance of personal perception, historical context, and audience engagement in shaping the meanings of artworks. By employing these frameworks, we can appreciate the complex, layered nature of art criticism and the diverse experiences of its viewers. This approach challenges critics to prioritize personal experience over historical or contextual analysis. Critics may focus on how an artwork affects the viewer's consciousness and the embodied experience it evokes, rather than solely its artistic techniques or historical significance. Right? So now we're looking at the meaning of art lying in the viewer, not just the social structures or the context around the piece, but specifically on how viewers react to it. Yeah? I guess it's more specifically reception theory, but yes, we are changing the focus here. And this is a really cool piece. So, Olafur Eliasson is what we're going to be looking at. So, phenomenology, right? It invites us to engage with art on a sensory and experiential level. It encourages viewers to reflect on their immediate reactions and feelings when encountering an artwork. So I think maybe a few times in class I've done the, close your eyes and open your eyes and what's the first thing that you see, right? And it's a little different when you're actually physically present with a work of art. And when you're interacting with installation art, it can be even more overwhelming. But it's the same thing where you kind of shut yourself down and open your eyes and look at it and try to take note of what do you see first? What's your first thoughts? What's your initial reaction? That's what we want for phenomenology, right? So with this large-scale installation piece, like Olafur Eliasson's The Weather Project, viewers are not just passive observers. Their physical presence within the space, the changing light, and the reflective surfaces create a unique sensory experience. Each viewer's interpretation is influenced by their bodily engagement and emotional response to the environment. And in this work, this artist created a unique environment within the gallery space. Excuse me. So this approach challenges critics to prioritize personal experience over historical or contextual analysis. Critics may focus on how an artwork affects the viewer's consciousness and the embodied experience it evokes, rather than solely on its artistic techniques or historical significance. So now, looking at hermeneutics, right? This is the importance of context in understanding art. And so here we're going to look at Da Vinci's Last Supper. It recognizes that artworks are products of their time and culture, and that interpretation is a dialogue between the viewer and the artwork. So when analyzing Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper, a hermeneutic approach would consider the historical context of the Renaissance, the cultural significance of the biblical narrative, and the intended audience. Understanding the symbolism of the figures and their placement within the composition requires knowledge of both the artwork's context and the viewer's own historical perspective. Hermeneutic criticism encourages a comprehensive analysis that includes historical, cultural, and social factors. Critics are tasked with exploring how these elements shape the meaning of an artwork and how viewers' interpretations may vary based on their own backgrounds and experiences. So, even within our class, each one of you is going to have a different reaction to this work of art based on your history, your relationship with religion, with the Bible, what you may or may not know about Da Vinci or the Renaissance, right? It's very complicated, dynamic, and ever-changing. The more you know, you take an art history class, and day one before the end of the class, this piece is going to mean something completely different. And that's kind of the point of education, right? We don't want fixed perspective. We want to complicate the narrative. It's much more fun that way. All right, reception theory highlights the active role of the audience in creating meaning. It suggests that artworks are not static. Their interpretations evolve as they are viewed by different audiences over time. Consider Marcel Duchamp's Fountain, a ready-made sculpture that initially faced criticism and rejection. Over time, as audiences became more familiar with conceptual art, Fountain was reevaluated and celebrated as a groundbreaking work. This shift illustrates how changing cultural contexts and audience perspectives can alter the interpretation of an artwork. Reception theory encourages critics to consider the audience's role in shaping meaning. Critics may analyze how different interpretive communities respond to an artwork and how social, political, and cultural factors influence these responses. This approach recognizes that meaning is not fixed, but is continually negotiated through viewer engagement. Interconnections. Right? So while phenomenology, hermeneutics, and reception theory each offer distinct perspectives, they are interconnected and can be used in tandem to enrich our understanding of art. Excuse me. While viewing a contemporary artwork, a critic might employ phenomenological analysis to explore the viewer's immediate sensory experience, while also considering the historic context, the hermeneutic context, that informs the artwork's creation. Additionally, they might examine how different audiences, reception theory, have interpreted the work based on their cultural backgrounds and experiences. By integrating these approaches, critics can provide a more holistic analysis of artworks. This multifaceted perspective allows for a deeper exploration of how art functions within society and how it resonates with diverse audiences. Postmodern art criticism. Ah, yes, we are definitely complicating things here. So, postmodern art criticism is a complex and multifaceted approach that emerged in the late 20th century as a response to the principles and ideologies of modernism. It is characterized by several key features and concepts that challenge traditional narratives and methodologies in art history and criticism. So, these are key features and concepts. We have a rejection of totalizing narratives, saying that there is one history, one approach. It is eclectic and uses pastiche. Pastiche is like, think of it as like sampling, right? Referring to the past, yeah. Like, I think sampling, like in music, like hip hop, that's probably like the best way to understand it. Fragmentation. We'll get into this in a little bit more detail. Yes, the breaking down of the superstructures and looking at things as fragmented, right? Analyzing the pieces. Simulacrum and hyperreality. I always like the simulacrum. It's like it's the copy of a copy without an original. It's the simulation. The Matrix did a really good job of looking at this. So, variable reality. Yeah. Intertextuality. We like references and references to references and references and references. If anybody's ever come across T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland, it's just illusions. Everything is referencing something else. And so we play with this in postmodern criticism, and postmodern art is very aware of how it exists within these larger social structures. And even artists will reference one another. So intertextuality is very important. It's kind of like every Marvel movie nowadays. Like, you have to have read this comic book and watched this TV show and seen this movie to understand that one sentence reference in the new program that just came out or in the post-credit scene. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous how much information you need to understand it. And then you probably don't even get it all. Right? So questions of authorial intent, right? Where does the author even exist within the whole web of social interactions, right? So where does the artwork begin and end? If the artist is merely a conduit of creativity or a locus, a focal point, a nexus of cultural expression. Cultural critique. We are critical of our own culture and aware of our place in it, and we will let you know about that. So, in order to understand postmodernism, you need to understand modernism. So, modernism was a movement in art and culture that dominated the first half of the 20th century. It shook the foundations of art and dismantled the pre-20th century structures of creation and interpretation. Music disregarded melody and harmony and moved towards dissonance. Painting abandoned perspective and direct pictorial representation in movement towards abstraction. Yes, architecture rejected traditional forms and materials in favor of geometric forms built with modern materials like plate glass and concrete. Literature rejected realism in favor of experimental form. So there we're thinking like Ulysses. Yeah, that's a big one. Modernism began in France in the 1850s. Gustave Courbet, Edouard Manet, and Charles Baudelaire epitomized the modernist spirit. It found full form in the first half of the 20th century. Modernists found inspiration in the ever-changing present, the spectacle of the modern world. Modern artists invented new forms and signs to express this new world. With the advent of modernism came the idea of the avant-garde, being self-consciously innovative. The modernist movement replaced one authority with another, one view of culture and history with another. Modernism evolved a unified narrative of art history, a unitary Western history. What distinguished postmodernism was attitude. It tended towards parody and pastiche. It was self-aware of the ridiculousness of creating a totalizing narrative, of replacing one authority with another. It recognized that modernism, for all of its advancements in uprooting and dismantling the previous social structures, only succeeded in creating and establishing new ones. So postmodernists were understandably a little cynical. Where modernism held a deep nostalgia for an earlier age, an age where objectivity existed, postmodernism found liberation and exhilaration in subjectivity, the fragmentation of belief. Where modernism held to asceticism, postmodernism saw this as elitism and integrated both high and popular art into bizarrely colorful mixtures. Modernist also refers to a particular way of telling art history as a totalizing narrative. It follows the progress of rationality, marching towards an inevitable present. It is full of male artists producing high art. Postmodernism is associated with a rejection of rigid modernist truths. It is more eclectic, reflecting a more global attitude. Postmodernist histories emphasize modernisms, emphasis on the plural, modernisms, and question the fundamental belief of modernist progress, the inevitable march towards the future, right? What if there are futures? It questions the modern march towards an inevitable, enlightened future. An exemplary case of postmodern art criticism can be found in the analysis of the work of Cindy Sherman, particularly her untitled film stills series, which were created between 1977 and 1980. This series consists of 69 black and white photographs in which Sherman poses as various female characters, drawing on the visual language of film and media. The following points illustrate how a postmodern art criticism can be applied to Sherman's work. Now, as I'm thinking about this, just like the time frame, right? So a lot of people argue, when does modernism end? When does postmodernism begin? And there is no fixed date. It didn't happen, January 27th, 1952. Not a thing. It's fluid, and it depends on what medium you're looking at and what historian you're reading. But really, it is sometime between the end of World War II and the 1990s. But really, the end of World War II had such a psychological impact on the entire world that no one person and no culture was the same afterwards. And so while postmodernism might not have begun the day the war ended, the wheels were in motion. All right, so now getting back to Cindy Sherman. Pastiche intertextuality. So Sherman's photographs are a pastiche of cinematic tropes and archetypes, referencing a wide range of genres, including film noir, melodrama, and horror. Each image evokes familiar narratives and character types, yet they are devoid of a specific storyline. This intertextuality allows viewers to recognize and engage with cultural codes of femininity and representation in media. By appropriating these visual conventions, Sherman critiques the way women are portrayed in film and the expectations placed upon them. A bit more coffee there. There's a lot of talking here in this one. All right. Fragmentation of identity. In entitled Film Stills, Sherman embodies multiple personas, which reflects the postmodern idea of fragmented identity. Rather than presenting a singular, cohesive self, her work suggests that identity is constructed through various roles and representations. This fragmentation challenges the notion of a stable, authentic identity, aligning with postmodern theories that emphasize the fluidity and multiplicity of selfhood. So yes, when I was talking about this earlier, fragmentation came up and my brain just drew a blank. But yes, fragmentation of identity, right? There is no consistent self, right? You are constantly changing, reinventing, redefining yourself. Context, right? You can be the same person from one room to the next, one moment to the next. So, postmodernism is very, what would you say, kind of like brutally truthful about the human condition. Simulacrum and hyperreality. Sherman's work can also be analyzed through the lens of simulacrum and hyperreality. The photographs are not direct representations of real women or real narratives. Instead, they are constructed images that mimic the style of film stills. This blurring of reality and representation raises questions about authenticity and the nature of visual culture. In a postmodern context, Sherman's work exemplifies how images can create a hyper-real experience, where the distinction between reality and representation becomes increasingly ambiguous. Critique of gender and power structures. Sherman's series serves as a critique of the patriarchal structures that govern the representation of women in media. By placing herself in the role of the objectified female subject, she highlights the ways in which women are often reduced to stereotypes and cliches. This critical perspective aligns with postmodern feminist theory, which interrogates the power dynamics inherent in visual representation and challenges the traditional male gaze. Viewer interpretation. The open-ended nature of Sherman's work invites diverse interpretations from viewers, reflecting the postmodern emphasis on subjectivity. Each viewer brings their own experiences and cultural knowledge to the images, resulting in a multiplicity of meanings. This aspect of her work underscores the idea that meaning is not fixed, but is co-created through the interaction between the artwork and the audience. In summary, Cindy Sherman's untitled film stills serves as a rich example of postmodern art criticism. Through her use of pastiche, exploration of fragmented identity, engagement with simulacra, and critique of gender representation, Sherman challenges traditional narratives and invites viewers to reconsider the complexities of identity and representation in contemporary culture. This analysis shows how postmodern art criticism can provide a nuanced understanding of an artist's work within broader cultural and ideological contexts. Contemporary art criticism is a multifaceted field that engages with the complexities of art produced in the late 20th and 21st centuries. It encompasses a variety of approaches, methodologies, and theoretical frameworks, reflecting the diverse nature of contemporary art itself. Here are some of the key aspects to consider. Interdisciplinary approach, interdisciplinarity. Yes, contemporary art criticism often draws from various disciplines, including philosophy, sociology, cultural studies, and psychology. This interdisciplinary nature allows critics to analyze art within broader social, political, and cultural contexts. For instance, cultural studies perspectives might examine how art reflects or challenges societal norms and values, as noted in discussions of visual culture and its role in shaping preconceptions. In shaping perceptions, but preconceptions works too. Also something to keep in mind here, contemporary art criticism. I actually just kind of lumped together all of the contemporary art critical approaches that I had been taught into this field of contemporary art criticism. This is, like most things, not a defined category necessarily that you would find in a textbook, but I felt kind of like with postmodernism, contemporary criticism is very diverse, and there's a lot of different ideas and really unique and challenging concepts being thrown around and critical methodologies. And to unite them for this lecture, I decided to just call it contemporary art criticism. So, anyways, moving right along, cultural context. Critics emphasize the importance of understanding the cultural context in which art is created and received. This includes considering the artist's background, the socio-political environment, and the historical movement. As Vernon Hyde Minor suggests, the experience of art is a social construct influenced by cultural factors, which means that art cannot be divorced from the context in which it exists. So, completely undermines formalism there, right? Methodological transparency. A significant feature of contemporary art criticism is the obligation for critics to disclose their methodologies. This practice helps to clarify the biases and frameworks that inform their analyses. By announcing their premises, critics allow audiences to understand the lens through which they interpret artworks, which is crucial in a field where multiple interpretations can coexist. So this is what I've been doing this whole lecture, right? Here's the piece, here's the methodological framework, right? Because the same thing can mean a whole lot of different things depending on what perspective you're using to analyze it. Engagement with theory. Contemporary art criticism is heavily influenced by various theoretical frameworks, including feminism, postcolonialism, queer theory, and critical race theory. These theories provide tools for critiquing not only the artworks themselves, but also the systems of power and representation that surround them. For example, queer theory might explore how contemporary art challenges or reinforces gender and sexual identities. The rise of visual culture studies has transformed art criticism by focusing on the circulation of images and their meanings within society. Critics analyze how images function as commodities and how they contribute to cultural narratives. This approach recognizes that art is part of a larger visual landscape, influencing and being influenced by other forms of media. Subjectivity and objectivity. Contemporary art criticism often grapples with the tension between subjective interpretations and claims of objectivity. Critics like Satya Mohanty argue for a nuanced understanding that acknowledges both the subjective experiences of viewers and the objective properties of artworks. This balance allows for a richer dialogue about the meanings and values embedded in art. Multiplicity of voices. Contemporary art criticism values diverse perspectives, recognizing that multiple voices contribute to the understanding of art. This inclusivity reflects the pluralistic nature of contemporary society and art itself, where different cultural, social, and political viewpoints can coexist and inform one another. In summary, contemporary art criticism is a dynamic and evolving field that reflects the complexities of modern art and its relationship to society. It emphasizes interdisciplinary approaches, cultural context, methodological transparency, and the importance of diverse theoretical frameworks, all while engaging with the subjective and objective dimensions of art. This critical discourse not only enhances our understanding of contemporary artworks, but also fosters a deeper appreciation of the cultural narratives they embody. An exemplary case of contemporary art criticism can be found in the analysis of the work by artist Kara Walker. And we've seen many works by her over the course of this class. The black and white silhouetted forms, the 2D works that have come up. But here we have her working in 3 dimensions, right? So this installation, A Subtlety, or The Marvelous Sugar Baby, from 2014, This work serves as a rich subject for critical examination due to its complex engagement with themes of race, history, and representation. So, Kara Walker's A Subtlety was a large-scale installation created for the old Domino Sugar Factory in Brooklyn, New York. The centerpiece of the installation was a monumental white sugar-coated sphinx-like figure, which Walker referred to as a sugar baby. Surrounding this figure were smaller black figures made of molasses, representing the laborers who historically worked in the sugar industry, often under brutal conditions. Critics have noted that Walker's work engages deeply with the history of sugar production and its ties to slavery. The sugar industry has a long and painful history, particularly in the Caribbean and the American South, where enslaved Africans were forced to labor in inhumane conditions. By situating her work in a former sugar factory, Walker invokes this history, prompting viewers to confront the legacy of exploitation and racism that underpins the sugar trade. The choice of materials, sugar and molasses, carries significant symbolic weight. Sugar, often associated with sweetness and pleasure, contrasts sharply with the bitter history of its production. Critics have pointed out that the white sugar coating of the sphinx-like figure can be interpreted as a commentary on the whitening of history and the erasure of black narratives. The molasses figures, dark and sticky, serve as a reminder of the labor and suffering that are often overlooked in discussions of American prosperity. Walker's work challenges traditional representations of race and gender in art. The Sphinx figure, with its exaggerated features and voluptuous form, plays with stereotypes of black femininity. Critics have analyzed how Walker subverts these stereotypes using humor and irony to critique the ways in which black bodies have been objectified and commodified in both art and society. This aligns with contemporary discussions in visual cultural studies, which emphasize the importance of understanding how images circulate and the meanings they produce. The installation was designed to provoke a visceral reaction from viewers. Critics have noted that the sheer scale of the work and its provocative imagery force audiences to confront uncomfortable truths about race and history. The immersive nature of the installation, set within the industrial space of the sugar factory, creates a dialogue between the artwork and its environment, enhancing the critical engagement with the themes presented. In her interviews and writings, Walker has been open about her intentions and the methodologies behind her work. This transparency allows critics and audiences to engage with her art on a deeper level. Understanding the historical and cultural frameworks that inform her practice. By articulating her perspective, Walker invites a multiplicity of interpretations, reflecting the diverse experiences and backgrounds of her viewers. In conclusion, Kara Walker's A Subtlety exemplifies contemporary art criticism's engagement with complex themes of race, history, and representation. Through a detailed analysis of the artwork's historical context, materiality, and visual cultural implications, audience engagement, and the artist's methodological transparency, critics can unpack the layers of meaning embedded in Walker's work. This critical discourse not only enhances our understanding of the artwork, but also fosters a broader conversation about the cultural narratives that shape our perceptions of art and art history. Whew. Wow, that was a mouthful, and potentially as exhausting for everyone listening as it was for me to recite, read, engage with this entire lecture. But this is it, right? This is the most distilled down version of art history that I could come up with, that I felt did due diligence to the complexities of the field, right? The artwork itself is one thing, right? That's the objective reality. The paint isn't moving. It's not changing from one person's perspective to the next or from one person's visit to the next, right? We, as the viewer, are what's changing constantly in motion. And that is what creates the dynamic interplay between the artwork and the viewer. And then on the flip side, the entire cultural context that goes into the creation of the artwork, helping to shape the initial meaning or inspiration into the creation of the work, but then also shaping how people view it throughout the generations, the ages, the years that follow. It is a very complicated field, and it is a place for people to express themselves, their relationship with history, and their relationship with contemporary culture. So yes, this is a lot of information here, and I'm looking forward to some good discussions in class about this. And as I had said, this should relate to your final project. Right? You need to pick a work of art amongst you and your peers and discuss it, right? And hopefully these different frameworks will inspire you to take different perspectives and not just give me a biography of the artist and the history of how it was made. I also have Google, and I can look that up if I don't already know it, but give me something fresh. Give me your own perspective. Anyways, that is it for this lecture, and I hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Thank you.